What's up guys? In the beginning of February, I caught wind of Foregone, a game that was developed and published by bigbluebubble and released in 2020 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Switch, with the PC version, the Steam version, set to release on March the 1st. I downloaded the demo and absolutely loved it. And just a few days ago I was able to secure an early access key, courtesy of the developers themselves. So does the game hold strong until the very end, or was the demo more than enough? Well, grab your favorite drinks, snacks, kick your feet up and join me on this complete Foregone review to find out. But before I move on, please remember to hit the like button, share and also subscribe to this channel. And if you really want to go the extra mile to help us, then please consider checking out my Patreon page and other links that I'll leave in the description. So without further ado, let's hit it! The story. In the distant future, the city of Caligan was the pinnacle of scientific research and development. However, anything that casts a lot of light is bound to generate equally big shadows. At the peak of its prosperity, Caligan was invaded by a rival state determined to steal its technology. In a desperate attempt to survive, Caligan scientists developed a breed of super soldiers to turn the tides of war, the Arbiters. And you, the player, are the very first member of this elite force. Soon after you start the game, you'll meet a very cryptic Egyptian-like being, the Warden. He accuses you of being responsible for all of the destruction you have witnessed so far and are yet to see, saying that you must correct your past and stop the horror before it consumes everything. Shortly after, he collapses and changes into what seems to be like a demonic version of himself. Before you're even able to react, you're hit with a devastating beam, and then the screen goes for a hard cut. The Arbiter then wakes up panting, unsure if that was only a bad dream or something more. A vision, perhaps. In true stoic fashion, she doesn't take more than a few moments to recompose herself and get going. The Arbiter has an assignment: locate Project Hera. And this is just the opening act. Foregone's story is told mainly through its gorgeous scenery and remarks made by the Arbiter herself at certain points. You will also find many diaries which contain several notes from soldiers, scientists, and even prisoners. While they're not necessary in order to complete the game, they serve to give more insight to the people involved in this war. And they're not hard to find either, thanks to the extremely functional map design. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's jump right into the gameplay. The heart and soul of any Metroidvania game will always be its gameplay. Good graphics and atmosphere mean nothing if you're constantly being hampered by faulty inputs or unresponsive controls. And how does Foregone fare in this department? Well, my friends, it fares brilliantly. Now, every good game is developed around a keyword or concept. That is what gives it personality. It's pretty easy to see that Foregone was developed around the keyword fluidity. The commands are absolutely on point. Not one of my deaths in this game was due to an input drop or something of the sort. Arbiters aren't called super soldiers for nothing. While they're definitely not godlike, they're clearly above everyone else. You have melee weapons, firearms, and special powers, both offensive and defensive, at your disposal, and you can mix all of them very quickly, creating a monsoon of death in your wake. To put it in other terms, imagine if your favorite Devil May Cry and Mega Man X game were fused into one and borrowed a few different quirks from other great series while adding their own. Well, that's Foregone for you. Whenever you defeat an enemy, it'll drop both gold, which can be used to upgrade your equipment, and blue crystals that are used to level up your combat skills, your passive abilities, and even reforge equipment. You have quite a few means of healing, a spell that you can equip, modifiers that make enemies drop red health pellets when they die with a given probability, activating the leech ability, and using modifiers that have a chance of restoring a set amount of your health per hit. You'll also restore your health whenever you reach a teleport station or your outpost. And speaking of health, when you die, not only you lose all the gold and blue crystals you had, but also you'll be taken to the last teleport station/last checkpoint you made contact with. You immediately notice a very creepy figure to your side holding a blue urn. That's the ferryman. He offers to immediately retrieve all of your lost crystals and gold, but there's a catch. His fee is 50% of whatever you had. Quite frankly, I only ever used this once or twice, and it was because I was feeling lazy. A smarter or more careful approach to areas where you've died is usually more than enough to retrieve your stuff. The navigation aspect is pretty simple. The game is divided by areas, and each area has waypoints that act as teleportation devices and also serve as checkpoints. They all take you back to your outpost when used, from where you can then teleport to any other way station previously activated. I like how each area is beautifully represented in a very beautiful pixel art map. It's like a much prettier version of the map you had in Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Whenever you return to your outpost, think of it as the Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls. You always have some distinct characters to interact with. The aforementioned ferryman, the blacksmith who can upgrade your weapons, armor, rings and pendants for gold, and also buy any gear you have no use for. Quick side note here, you have a max number of pieces of gear you can carry. Each class of equipment has their own 20 slots for you to occupy. Once you reach your limit, you either need to discard or sell some gear in order to make some room. You'll also meet the curious thaumaturge, who lets you upgrade both your passive skills and combat powers. I'll discuss this at length later, but I'll tell you this right now, don't worry about messing up. They're all refundable, provided you have the gold to pay for it, so bork away. And lastly, the dispatcher, who gives you special missions with various conditions and gameplay. However, first you need to find those beacons scattered throughout the world. And lastly, the way you go about getting new gear is pretty simple. You get them by defeating standard enemies, bosses, and secret areas, and the first time you complete side missions. They are divided by rarity, and from most common to rarest, the sequence is gray, blue, purple, gold, and red. At least on your first playthrough. With each increasing level of rarity come many different perks. And also, always make sure to check whatever gear you may pick up. Let's say you have a red falchion and you pick up another one. It may have higher initial stats or better modifiers, but we'll get to all that in a moment. Now let's dive deeper into things. First up, we have the difficulty. Some Metroidvania games can be quite punishing, especially those inspired in Dark Souls and such. However, Foregone is much more akin to a 2D blend of Devil May Cry and Mega Man X and its own unique spices. This should give you a pretty good idea of what to expect. Fluid and fast-paced gameplay, which mixes gunplay and close quarters combat. In my first playthrough, I didn't die many times. The game gives you plenty of resources to dance around your enemies while dealing death to every sorry SOB who stands in your way. And not once I felt I died a cheap death. Which leads us to our next topic, the combat. As previously stated, Foregone is a mix between Mega Man X and Devil May Cry. It takes the best aspects of both and blends them into one fluid dance of death. Your firearms are not just secondary weapons, they're just as deadly as your melee weapons. And in order to balance this out so you don't play this like a 2D Call of Duty, the developers came up with a very simple but effective idea. In order to replenish your ammunition, you must deal physical attacks to your opponents. One hit replenishes one bullet, shell, or arrow. This way you can replenish your ammo very quickly, but also you're forced to engage in close quarter combat. Not that you wouldn't do it otherwise, getting up close and personal is way too much fun. As previously stated, you have special skills to aid you in battle. There's a total of 7 skills for you to use, and you can have 2 of them equipped at a time. This adds another layer of strategy. Do you go fully offensive, or do you go for more defensive skills? Or do you keep one defensive skill ready at all times and make the second one variable according to the situation? Trust me, you need to make those calls. And oh yeah, those skills are also replenished by attacking your opponents. This game was built around the idea of you kicking ass the whole time. Now, remember how I said earlier that Foregone took the best aspects of Devil May Cry and Mega Man X? Well, if there is one aspect of this game I absolutely love, is the fact that brushing off against enemies does not automatically damage you. You see, being damaged as soon as you even touched an enemy in Mega Man X worked very well for quite a number of reasons. Which, quite frankly, I won't bother discussing here so we don't get sidetracked. However, here in Foregone, this would have spelled instant failure for the game. And this is because of the Devil May Cry side of the family, if you will. You see, the combat is very fast-paced and will often get quite frantic, with you having to deal with many enemies at a time, all while dancing gracefully in their midst. Your main ally in this death waltz will be the ever-faithful slide button. With it, you can not only evade enemy attacks and get behind them, but you can also use it to cancel any attack animation you currently have going on. Get used to doing this until it becomes as natural as breathing. Trust me, you'll be doing this quite a lot. You can also do something fighting game fans can do in their sleep. Jump cancelling. It works the same as slide cancelling, only instead of sliding, you jump to cancel any of your ongoing attack animations out. Simple and very effective. Remember this. But I know what you're thinking. You know, after all this talk about Mega Man X and Devil May Cry, you're probably wondering, well, what about the weaponry? Well, let's get to it. The melee weapons. First of all, there's something I like to brush up on again. Every single piece of equipment you have has something called a rarity level. Once again, the order from most common to rarest is gray, blue, purple, golden, and red. From blue onwards, you get one extra added effect called modifier. Take a look at the bottom of the equipment cards to know what your modifiers are. So basically, with gray you have none, with blue you have 1, purple 2, golden 3, and red 4. But we'll get to those in a bit. And also, just one more thing about your weaponry. If you look right below each weapon's name, you'll see that weapon's unique perk. The scythe weakens your enemies with each hit, the burst rifle has a higher chance of inflicting negative statuses, and so on and so forth. Now, going back to the melee weapons themselves, you have short swords, spears, scythes, falchions, twin knives, and a very special weapon that's a love letter to all us Devil May Cry weirdos out here. The gunchucks. If you've played Devil May Cry before, then I know you already know what I'm talking about. I won't go into much detail about them, but here's a quick rundown of all of them. The short sword is a very straightforward weapon that takes very little time to getting used to. Its attacks are quick and reliable. The good thing about them is that they offer a good balance between offense and defense. And since its attacks are very fast, you'll open your guard for a lot less time than you would, say, by using the scythe or the falchion. If you're new to Metroidvania or gaming in general, stick to it. Next up, we have the spears. They have a good range and deal damage pretty quickly. The second attack in the combo is a flurry of thrusts, so if you're playing for the gunslinger type of character, that's a pretty good way to refill your ammo very quickly. Next up, we have a favorite of mine, the scythe. It hits a very wide area and has a ridiculous reach. There's a catch though. The first attack of a ground combo has a very slow wind-up time, which will leave you quite exposed. But I found a way to counter this. Instead of starting off on the ground, do a short jump and attack just before you land. Don't worry, if you land while performing the area attack animation, the Arbiter will still conclude the attack only on the ground. And on a side note, this goes to show the level of attention the developers put into details. I like this. And then continue your offense from there. You see that the next hit will be the second attack of the ground combo, which is much faster and therefore safe. Seriously, this weapon can be a little trickier to use without getting your ass kicked, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun. Now, the falchions. Think of them as the long swords of the game. They're a middle ground between the short sword and the scythe in every aspect. And oh yeah, the same concept of transferring from a jump attack to a ground combo I just taught you with the scythe works here, should you feel like using it. I never used it much though, but that's because I was having way too much time with another weapon I'll be speaking about briefly. Next, we have the twin knives. They're the speed freaks of your arsenal. The first standing hit is a very swift 3-hit combo. Remember how I said that one attack restores one bullet of whatever weapon you're using? Well, do the math. Just be careful with the third hit of your ground combo though. It's a spinning attack that hits multiple times, but it also leaves you wide open. Be ready to slide or jump cancel out of it. And lastly, we have the coolest weapon in the game. The gunchuck. Yes. If you've played Devil May Cry before, then yes sir, it is exactly what you're thinking. The special standing action of the gunslinger style using the shotgun. The only difference is that it has a smaller reach and you only shoot forward. Those nunchucks fitted with shotguns at their tips are pretty awesome. Not only is their animation cool, but they also have a very good reach. You can tell by the muzzle flash. Its first 3 attacks are pretty fast, but be careful with the last one. It has a long wind-up time. Had enough yet? Well, I hope not, because now we'll dive into the firearms. You have quite the variety of firearms as well. There's the pistol, the shotgun, the burst rifle, the shock pistol, and for all you Rambo fans out there, the bow. And yes, they all play very differently. First up, the pistol. It's the short sword equivalent of the firearms. It's straightforward, simple, and effective. It may not pack as much damage per shot as, say, the mighty shotgun, the bow, or maybe even the shock pistol, but it's fast and highly precise. There were many instances where I found myself switching to the pistol because the shotgun wasn't being as effective as I needed my firearm to be. It holds 14 rounds in its clip. Next, we have my personal favorite, the shotgun. Since shotgun blasts fire pellets instead of one single round, this weapon hits multiple times and will always deal more damage than pistols. If enemies are clustered up in the direction you fire, they'll all take the hit. However, shotguns only hold a maximum of 4 shells at a time. So this is really the type of weapon for people who are always engaging in close quarter combat. Following up, we have the burst rifle. It deals less damage per shot than any other weapon and has slower projectiles than the pistol, but it fires in bursts of 3 rounds. I never used it much, but it may outdamage the pistol in the long run. Let me know in the comments if you're a burst rifle user and tested it out. The burst rifle holds, say, 5 charges in a way, and each charge lets off a burst of 3 shots. Next up, we have the weirdo of the bunch, but in a good way, the shock pistol. You see, the shock pistol works in a unique way. It has a small charge animation before each blast, and while its projectile may not be as fast as, again, the pistols, it has one unique quirk. The shock current will transfer to an enemy that's right next to the first one you hit. Think of it as a middle ground between the pistol and the shotgun. It makes for some very aggressive mid-range fighting. And lastly, we have the bow. It has a very long range, the same as the pistols, and deals a lot of damage per shot. And to add insult to injury, it has piercing properties. If caught in a line, each arrow can hit a total of 2 enemies. Definitely a good weapon for those who like to keep their distance whenever possible. And on the last note, notice how on the weapon cards, right under the power indicator, there's something called DPS. No, that's not some type of quick shipping system offered by your postal service. DPS stands for damage per second. This concept may sound a little confusing, especially for slow weapons like the scythe, but a quick way to illustrate this would be to take the total damage your weapon deals in 10 seconds and then divide it by 10. This is also good to know how fast you can deal damage with it. However, don't live on DPS alone. Sometimes it's better to consider damage per hit, not per second. Whew! And that's the basics of your melee weapons and firearms. Man, I'm thirsty after all this talking. Now, we will move on to the defense department of our equipment. The armors. Foregone has a total of 3 different defensive equipments that you can equip. A piece of armor, a pendant, and a ring. They have defensive power stats and health boosting properties. Using them is more straightforward than selecting weapons. It's a numbers game for the most part. But that doesn't mean you should instantly discard any piece of defensive equipment that has lower values than your best ones. Why? Well, I'll explain it to you in this next section. I present you the modifiers. The modifiers are a huge part of Foregone's customization system. They're basically passive abilities which can enhance special power damage, critical chances, special power recharge time, make enemies drop health with a certain chance, add plague effect to your attacks, increase tethering damage, add explosive charges to your attack, and much more. I'll try and be brief so this doesn't turn into a 3-hour video. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's all really easy to understand. This game was built around the keyword fluidity, remember? The modifiers themselves are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll speak about the 2 things you can do with them. However, this will lead us to our next topic, which is customization. Before we talk about modifiers, I'll brush up quickly on simple weapon and armor upgrading. If you take a look at your item cards, you'll see that they have a set number of squares above them. This shows how many times a weapon can be upgraded. Going by rarity order, you start at 1 possible upgrade at gray and end up at a whopping 5 at red. Whenever you upgrade a piece of equipment, all of its statuses will increase, including those of the modifiers, even if those in particular only increase by a very small amount. Next up, we have reforging. Remember this guy, the dispatcher that I mentioned earlier? Well, after you complete his missions, you'll always enter a portal which will always have 1 treasure chest with random loot the first time you complete said challenge and a guy called Warsmith. What he does is, in exchange for crystals, you get to select one of your weapon's modifiers and re-roll it, giving you another 3 different options per re-roll to choose from. If you don't like any of the options, you can keep what you currently have installed and re-roll again for other options. The first reforge after completing a side mission is always free, with each subsequent reforge getting more and more costly. And yes, even though you'll always meet the same Warsmith no matter what side mission you do, each null mission will always have the Warsmith's reforging cost at 0. To put it simply, each mission has its own reforging cost. It's a pretty neat mechanic. And also, those side missions are the only way to reach the Warsmith. So make sure you manage and plan your reforges and which missions you do them at accordingly. And hey, in order to avoid confusion, the developers threw in a nice little counter. At the top right corner of the screen, you'll see an information card. And the very first data you see is the reforging cost on that particular side mission. Pretty handy. Oh yeah, one more thing. Your modifiers stack. So you feel like going for the tethering break overpower madness? Either find gear that has the modifier which increases tethering break damage, or reforge any unwanted modifiers into this one. It's pretty simple. And also, it's pretty clear to me that the developers took their hints from the great Neo, because it also has this exact same system. Pretty nice. Alright, we're almost done with the technical stuff. There's only a few more topics to cover. Up next, we have the special powers / upgrading them. As previously mentioned in this review, special powers are ability you can use in combat to either aid you in laying waste to everyone or protect and regenerate you. There's a total of 8 slots, but as of now, only 7 powers are available. You'll find them scattered throughout the world, and again, as previously stated, you can only hold 2 at a time. Here's a quick rundown of each one of them. The barrier negates 3 attacks and initially lasts for 10 seconds. It's pretty useful not only for defending yourself. Mix this up with the restoration power and the health restoring modifiers to your equipment and power themselves, and you'll be a freaking tank. The restoration enables you to initially recover up to 100 points of life with a full meter. Unlike the other powers though, this is the only one that can be used before it's completely charged up. The overdrive has the arbiter glow in a pink aura and increases your attack speed and damage by a certain percentage. Initially, it lasts for 10 seconds. Nova is like a weaker and miniaturized power bomb from Super Metroid. You'll create an aura blast which hits everyone on screen. Raise, the next power, comes straight from a Dragon Ball Z character. You basically launch a very quick power beam which, well, raises everything in its path. The Surge, which is the first aggressive power you find and the one I used the most throughout my first playthrough, performs an invincible dash which deals heavy damage to your enemies. Once you get the air dash ability, you'll be able to perform surges in midair too. Ideally, you only use it for offensive purposes, but it can also be used in emergency situations like, for example, being out of jumps on air or air dashes and needing to evade spikes. The last currently available power, Bastion, creates a huge defensive field, which initially negates enemy projects and applies the stasis debuff on them. It also initially lasts 10 seconds. You may have noticed I said initially several times while describing the powers. That's because you'll be able to install modifiers both in your weapons and armor, and by choosing upgrade paths that severely alter each power's initial damage, duration, and much more. The power upgrade trees by themselves already do some severe modifications to their overall usage, like the Surge, for example. Its bottom upgrade path generates something called tether to each enemy hit. Basically, it's an energy chain that binds them in place and deals damage while they're locked. However, the big star here is the tether break. After a set amount of time, your tether will, well, break, inflicting a ton of damage. Throw in a lot of modifiers on your weapon and defensive equipment, and you're easily looking at 300 points of destruction per surge. If you want to add insult to injury, equip a shotgun and some other gear with an ability that increases the surge recharge rate, and if you're smart about your combos, you'll be surging at literally every 5 seconds. Really, once I did this, I got the clear impression that I kinda broke the game. This shows us how rich was the developer's vocabulary. They drank from many sources while making this game and incorporated the features they deemed to be the best. Not once did I find myself thinking, hey, doing this is a waste of time. Remember how I mentioned that this game was built around the keyword fluidity? Well, they were pretty serious about it. And while we're at it, let me explain how to upgrade powers, and there's an added bonus here. You can change between your skills at portable stations scattered throughout the world, but if you return to the outpost and speak to the thaumaturge, then you'll also be able to customize them, provided you find the matching catalyst in the game's world. You can only choose one path at a time. There's no way to find two of the same catalyst, even on a new Game Plus run. But all's not lost. This is much more about creating a build than being final. What I mean by that is, if you have the gold, you can selectively refund blue crystals and catalyst on any upgrade tree and take the other path. That's a pretty good trade. Next up, we have the abilities. After you defeat certain bosses, you gain a total of 3 abilities. A ground slam, which is useful for finding secret passages and even dealing some damage to enemies. The wall mount ability, which lets you climb onto walls so you can either momentarily perch yourself and stay away from harm, or keep on climbing, so maybe you'll discover some secrets. Who knows? There's also the air dash, which not only enables you to blaze through Foregone's world much more swiftly, but is also extremely useful during combat situations. So yeah, you basically become a ground slamming Mega Man. I love this. And hey, if you want to go really fast in this game, here's an extra tip. From the ground, roll your thumb from the jump button to the slide button. That way, you perform the air dash as soon as you go airborne, and since you'll be very close to the ground, you'll be able to repeat this action in rapid succession. It's pretty easy. Practice it for a little bit and you'll be doing it without even thinking. And speaking of thinking, if we think about it, all that I've spoken about so far was related to the gameplay, only broken in subsections. This is a testament to how well thought and developed the combat system was in Foregone. As a guy who loves games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Dark Souls and such, this is something I hold in the highest of standards. Still on the gameplay subject, we still have a few things to cover. I'll get to the graphics, soundtrack and such in a short while. For now, let's move on to our next topic, which is secrets and unlockables. The world of Foregone is brimming with secrets for you to find. Catalysts to upgrade your powers and main skill trees. Books, which contain memories and reports that enrichen your understanding of the game's lore. Direct upgrades to your powers, which will always increase them by a very significant amount. Random loot. They're all scattered throughout each area, but there's something that must absolutely be mentioned and should become a standard in games with many secrets for you to find. You see, if you take a look at the bottom right corner of either your current map or the overall world map, you'll see those small boxes. They always show you how many secrets are present in each area, but where the system really shines is that each box corresponds to a specific secret. So let's say you're in the amazingly designed mausoleum, for example, and found every secret but the third one. Not only you'll be able to instantly tell which secret you missed, but you'll also be able to track down information regarding this very specific secret on YouTube, GameFAQs, forums, or whatever you choose. Once again, I congratulate and thank the developers for this, and please, may all other developers make this a standard whenever applicable. The gaming community thanks you all. And still on the secrets and unlockables topic. Remember the dispatcher, the poor dude I only mentioned once or twice in the review and never spoke of him again? Well, throughout the world you find those devices called beacons. Whenever you walk past them, they'll activate. Return to the outpost and speak to our long-forgotten friend, and you'll see that you'll have a new mission at your disposal. There's basically 3 types of missions for you to do. Combat ones, where your goal is to kill all the enemies in the area within the time limit. Hazard missions, which are basically time attacks where your only objective is to make it to the end portal, and you'll also notice that at the ending of every set of missions, there's a skull icon. Remember the warden that shows up at the beginning of the game? You'll be fighting him 4 times. And each time he gets much stronger. But on the upside, so will you. During the 4th confrontation, I literally felt I was fighting a freaking 2D Devil May Cry boss. Nicely done, devs. Nicely done. And now, let's talk a little bit about the real meat of the unlockables in Foregone. After you beat the game, you're given 3 new options. If you change to a new save slot, you see that along the standard normal mode, you have unlocked 2 hardcore modes. In the standard hardcore mode, you only get 1 life. If you die, you lose everything. On the hardcore Iron Man mode, things get a little more complicated. Actually, a whole lot more complicated. You'll still suffer permadeath, but with the added injury that you now will not be able to upgrade your equipment or skill trees at all. I'm pretty sure there are some crazy guys out there who will love this, but as for me, yeah, Iron Man is a hard pass. I've always been a Team Cap anyway. Now, if you revert back to the save with which you cleared the game, you'll have access to the New Game Plus mode. When you restart in the New Game Plus mode, you will retain all of your current character progression, all enemies will be tougher and drop better loot, and bosses will now revive with all of the other enemies upon teleportation. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is amazing. Really, I love fighting bosses over and over again, especially when they're fun to fight, such as in the case of Foregone. Now, I won't go into much detail about the new Game Plus mode, but I can tell you guys right now, it's absolutely insane. The weaponry you pick up will always be much stronger than any of your late game vanilla equipment. And also, the modifiers on your weapons, they will begin having some insane percentages, some insane probabilities, really. So far, due to time issues, I have only been able to play this mode for 1 hour, but I've gotten this amazingly insane short sword. Now, remember the raise ability, which makes you feel like freaking Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z? Get this. This weapon has a chance to generate aftershocks, and to add on top of that, to sweeten the deal, each aftershock has a 10% chance to instantly regenerate the Raise special power. So I thought to myself, you know, okay, Raise also has one skill tree where it generates aftershocks, so I wonder if this effect will also be applied to the aftershocks generated by Raise itself, not only the short sword. And the answer, my friends, is yes. There was more than one situation in which I was able to fire 2 consecutive raise beams because the first one generated an aftershock which instantly reloaded the technique, recharged the technique. A little further down the road, I found a weapon that had 190% extra tether break damage. The enemies in New Game Plus mode are nothing to scoff at. If at the ending of the standard vanilla new game you were starting to feel a little strong, a little way too strong, then rest assured, all that ends here. If you've played Devil May Cry before, then think about this New Game Plus mode as Dante Must Die mode. Now, for those of you who have never played Devil May Cry, Dante Must Die mode is basically a mode in which you have to be extremely good. Sure, you can fight with all of your equipment, skills, and whatever, but the main catch here is that enemies will be much more aggressive, they will be much more powerful, which means you will take heavier hits and also deal less damage. If in the vanilla new game I died no more than I think 6 or 7 times, in this New Game Plus mode, under 1 hour of gameplay, I died at least 4 times. I was making voice notes for myself, and it only literally took a split second for a band of enemies to kill me in 4 hits. Now, I'm not gonna compare this game to Dark Souls, you know, something a lot of reporters will do. It seems to me that anything that someone does a little bit better or something that may take a little more effort has become Dark Souls for them, you know. Oh, Jesus Christ, you can write your name? That's like the Dark Souls of writing. You know, it's nothing of the sort, really. Remember, Foregone was a game developed around the keyword fluidity. So once again, its combat is much more akin to Mega Man X and Devil May Cry. And in New Game Plus mode, I really feel like I'm playing a 2D Devil May Cry, and that for me was absolutely brilliant. As soon as I have the time, I will definitely do a full playthrough on this New Game Plus mode, and even a playthrough on the standard hardcore mode. No hardcore Iron Man for me, thank you. There's also something worth mentioning here. Remember how you usually have gray, blue, purple, golden, and red weaponry? Well, I forgot to mention something. There are a few red weapons which will come with an added modifier. All you have to do is look to the bottom of the weapon cards. If it has them, the modifier will be there. The text is in blood red, you can't miss it. On your first playthrough, you will probably get 1 or 2 of those weapons. However, here in New Game Plus mode, I found 2 of those right from the start. They're still pretty rare though, but they appear more commonly than they would in a vanilla game. And also, there's something absolutely important to mention here. This doesn't feel like padding at all, because as far as I've told you guys, you know, with all the things I've explained, with all the techniques, the few techniques I've taught you guys, there's still so much more that I could have talked about, but if I did, this video would become excessively technical. So what I chose to do You know, the things I chose to explain it to you guys, you know, all of the systems, the special powers, the abilities, the modifiers, the equipment upgrades, the levels in weaponry you can have, why you should check the same weapon of the same rarity and such, so you know, so on and so forth. Those were all the key concepts of the gameplay. You know, if I were to sit here and, you know, I haven't even discussed things like optimal loadouts according to a playstyle. You know, let's say which firearm you should mix with the scythe for such result, or which special power goes well with the shotgun and why, and under certain situations, which situations. And this really is just a testament. You know, it's one big and beautifully written testament to this game's level of complexity. However, the complexity here is not, you know, it doesn't exist just for the sake of being complex. Again, this game was developed around the keyword fluidity. So all the things, all of the concepts I talked to you about, I spoke about every single concept that there is in the game, they're all very easily executable. Maybe you're just not, you know, if you have difficulty, then know this, it's just because you probably never had contact with any of those things. But put in a little effort, and then, you know, you'll see that soon you will be breezing through everything I taught you guys. And the reason I rambled on so long about this is because in New Game Plus, everything that you've learned here, everything that I've explained, will come into absolute play. Those modifiers, if in the vanilla game they were more of an upper hand you got, in here they might become a necessity. Really, I'm just crazy to fight all of the bosses again, to respawn them with the teleports, just so I can test out different weapons, different strategies. Maybe I'll make a few videos of different loadouts, different setups, maybe some strategies for you guys. Let me know in the comments if you'd like this. I'd sure like to do that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I have to say about this New Game Plus. If you really enjoyed the vanilla game, then by all means, you will also enjoy the New Game Plus very much. Now let's talk about the map and exploring for a little bit. This may seem like a trite subject, but every single gamer knows how going back and forth in a game with a huge world can be annoying, especially in Metroidvania games. For example, I remember how tedious traversing the world of Blasphemous was. How many times I rolled my eyes out of sheer boredom, I cannot remember. However, in Foregone, thanks to the fluid gameplay and very concise level design, going to and fro is a very quick task. And there's something odd I'll point out right now about the game's map. If you look at it at first glance, it seems like you'll take ages to get from point A to point B because it gives you the impression that areas are larger than they actually are. However, if you pay attention, you'll notice that is a pretty accurate representation of the world size. I really don't know why the map seems larger than it really is at first though. Maybe some subtle but odd design choice. But going back to the easy tracking, when I was hunting for the secrets, reaching every single tile of any area was really easy and quick. And for the secrets themselves, while they're certainly hidden, they don't take a whole lot of time to be found. It's fun detective work, but it's far from being excruciating. Add that to the numbered secret system I mentioned earlier, and you'll have them all in a very short while, one way or another. Next up, we have the enemies and bosses. There's quite the variety of enemies in Foregone. You have taser-wielding troops, spearmen, guys who use claws like Wolverines, riflemen, guys who teleport, Gatling gun-toting grunts, giant monsters, machine gun turrets, flamethrower turrets, small critters, and quite a few more. Not once I found myself thinking, I'm getting tired of these guys. And oh yeah, one more thing. Be careful with the flamethrower. This thing was made by Satan and will torch you before you can say, please, no! And now, let us talk a little bit about the big bad boys. Foregone doesn't have that many bosses, but it makes them count. While not particularly hard, they provide some very good variety both in aesthetics and approach. I particularly love the Poseidon project, and let's just say that Mega Man fans out there have every reason to trust their instincts after you beat all of them minus the last boss. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. It was a nice surprise though. Now you might be wondering, hey Belmont, where are the other bosses? Didn't you record them? Well, my friends, as a matter of fact, I did. I recorded my whole first playthrough. I have absolutely everything. However, I don't want to spoil it for you guys. Not any more than I absolutely have to in order to explain how this game works and to give out my opinion on it. However, since I'm far from done with this game, you know, there are many modes and many things to be explored after you beat the game, then maybe I'll upload some hardcore runs. Maybe I'll upload some personal speed runs. You know, not exactly competing against all of the other players, but attempting my own personal records. Maybe I'll do that. But for the sake of this review, this was a conscious choice. I'd only show as much as I had to. It's like I always say, man, you can't take away all of the fun, all of the surprises from your audience. That's uncool. Now, let's talk about the eye candy. This game has lots of it. The Arbiter's animation type reminds me of classic PC games. Only in Foregone, they don't look clunky. Quite the contrary. You see, a lot of attention has been put into the main character's actions. I like how the Arbiter moves so differently with every single weapon she uses. From the scythe's powerful and wide attacks to the knife's nimble and focused moves. You won't find yourself wanting for variety here. There's plenty. I also love the Arbiter's standing double jump animation. It's so graceful. The enemies' animations and design are a bit simpler, but they do their job very well. Throughout the game, you'll find new enemies and variations of the old ones. There's not much else to say. Your weapons will also get one or two variations aesthetically wise. They still work just the same, only they look different. I thought it was quite a nice touch, not needed, but still nice. Now let us speak about one of Foregone's biggest storytellers, the background. When the game started, I was amazed at how vibrant the red and orange hues of destruction were. You'll be exploring several different locations, all with their very distinctive aesthetics. You have the beautifully designed jail entrance, the creepy catacombs, the outpost, which is a mix between Middle Eastern aesthetics and steampunk designs. You have the lab, with its dramatic music, cold walls and lights. There's even light coming from below the gratings and several cages lying about. Or the mausoleum, which draws hints from Castlevania and Blasphemous, while adding its own flair. And there are also those glorious moments where you'll exit enclosed spaces and reach wide, open areas with huge structures. This almost gives an alien feel to it, as if they were leftovers from another civilization. So here's to the team behind the background design. You guys nailed it. The soundtrack. Foregone's soundtrack is very coherent. You have a very nice usage of strings, piano, synthesizers, and more. And each track fits its area very well. I particularly love the song that plays at the mausoleum. It's so creepy and ominous. From a composer standpoint, I also praise the work that's been done here. The songs help telling the story and they never overstep their boundaries or become weak. There's a very finely tuned balance between the gameplay and the soundtrack here. And there's also another very important thing. None of the songs ever get annoying after a while. However, that's also due to the nature of the gameplay itself. You rarely stay in one area for extremely long periods of time. So this review is pretty much complete, but there are a few things I'd still like to talk about. The things I wish for. The ability to create equipment presets, like in Bloodstained. You see, as you reforge modifiers in your equipment, you'll sometimes create two different versions of, say, a ring, which are each integrated with their own separate sets of equipment. And being able to create something like 5 or 6 presets and name them, like you're able to do in Bloodstained, would have been a godsend. And still on this subject, I'd also have loved to have the ability to rename the equipment themselves. And no, I wouldn't rename my sword Laser Penis. Well, not initially. But anyway, being able to insert abbreviations of the most important attributes in them would have been great, even if it looked awful. Crouching attacks. While the absence of crouching attacks is by no means any sort of hindrance, I can only wonder why they weren't incorporated into the game. Really, why not? Being able to travel back and forth between areas on foot. Now, this is more of a technicality than a real need, since warping is really fast. And yes, I'm looking at you, Bloodborne. You little shit. But having to return to the outpost so I can access an area I literally just came out from is kind of annoying. Infinite ammo mode as an award for beating the game. Remember the side missions and how some of them had you going guns only with infinite ammo? As soon as I beat them, this was the first thought that came to my mind. Sure, you could probably achieve this by using unofficial means, but implementing this feature, would be a very easy thing to do. A time attack mode. Games that provide you with fast-paced gameplay should always have this. It could have two sets of counters, one for your overall completion and one for each area. I'd love to challenge myself to beat all of the areas as quickly as possible and have an in-game way of tracking this. And I know I'm not alone here. And maybe they could have even thrown in some extremely high-level loot as a reward for beating different times. Say, like it's always been done in the Resident Evil games, This would not only have sweetened the pot, but also increased the replayability of the game by a whole lot to quite a number of people, myself included. The ability to do a full zoom out on a map screen. This is pretty self-explanatory. Being able to see the whole map helps planning routes quicker. And also a button to recenter on the player. Being able to lock equipment. Now, I first saw this system while playing Borderlands. You see, any game that gives you an ass load of loot should always have this. This prevents you from either selling or destroying gear that's important in one way or another. Getting a secondary skin for the Arbiter. There's an instance in the game where you see a transformed version of the Arbiter. But don't worry, I won't spoil it for you guys, but those of you who have finished the game know what I'm talking about. Closing thoughts. Well, at this point in time, I think I have already said everything there is to be said about this stellar game. And there is also one more thing I omitted on purpose. This game is priced at $19.99. And in case you're wondering, most of you have wondered throughout this whole review, well, isn't he gonna say how much this game costs? I omitted that information on purpose until the very end. Because you see, the thing is, sometimes, actually a lot of times, when we know the price tag on something, we will usually make associations with the value, with the content, with the quality of said things. We've learned, we've been hardwired to think this way. And really, the amount of fun, the amount of content, customization, modifiers, you probably never heard anyone say the word modifiers as much as I have said it, right? The amount of things this game delivers is just absolutely insane. On most $20 games that I've played, at least, I haven't played an abundance of them, but I've played quite a few. There's always something missing. Something that makes you realize, okay, this is a cheaper game because of this, and this. But in case of Foregone, this game has been beautifully executed on every single level. I haven't upsold you guys anything, any hint, any trace of excitement you may have noticed or heard in my voice during this, nearly 1 hour review was genuine. Really, it was authentic. Don't let the fact that I got this key for free make you think that, oh, this guy's been biased. He wouldn't speak out against the people who gave him the key. Trust me, I would. Because this is a business transaction. It was as much as in the company's interest hand this key to a YouTuber as it was my interest to get this review out as soon as possible. And really, I'm not the type of guy who will play things he doesn't like. You know the game Doom Eternal? I dropped it. Alright, I dropped it after 2 hours. I thought it was fucking stupid. I'm sorry. You know, Doom 2016 was amazing. Doom Eternal was ridiculous. And the only reason I mentioned this, you know, to all you Doom fans out there, I did not say this to berate you. People have the right to have different opinions. The only reason I mentioned this is because it was a AAA game, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world for me to lie through my teeth and make a review about Doom Eternal to the same caliber as this one. Alright, but I didn't. And yes, it would have yielded me a whole lot of views. It would have yielded me many followers. So going back to Foregone, if you should buy this game, you know, if you want my opinion, well, if you like Metroidvania game or if you like good action games, then please do yourself this favor. This game has given me way more than most of the 60-point prize games that I've played in the recent years. Actually, what I've seen happening in the recent years with many of those games is that they're absolutely beautiful, but really, if you think about it, if you're honest, you really won't be able to tell one from the other. But anyway, maybe this will be topic for another video, for another healthy and respectful discussion. But for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. I put this together in 4 days. And not once did I complain about having to work on this review because this game was so absolutely amazing. And yes, I do plan on making more content out of this game, like all the bosses, weapon loadouts, strategies, videos about amazing weapons I get. And of course, this will generate more movement for my channel. You know, it will help me gain even more traction, but also because I like it. Alright, this channel, you know, I'll only post things I genuinely feel like talking about. I genuinely feel like sharing with you guys. Alright? So, if you haven't already, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, maybe even share this channel with your friends. And if you want to go the extra mile, remember, there's my Patreon links, maybe a few other links in the description. And, well, that's it. I've been talking for almost an hour. And you guys probably are sick enough of my voice already as it is. So I hope you had a really great time. I sure did making this. And I'll see you next round. Later.